Thank you very much. My name is Paul LeClerc, and I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer of the New York Public Library System, a system that incorporates all public libraries in Manhattan, the Bronx, and Staten Island, as well as 4 world-class research libraries, all in Manhattan. And Councilmember Van Bramer, it's a pleasure to have you indeed on the other side of the table, knowing the passion that you have demonstrated to all of us over the course of the years that we've worked with you as a member of the Queens Library team. I know full well how much what we do matters to you in a totally authentic kind of way. Chairman Gentili, it was really wonderful to hear your powerful and eloquent statement about the place of libraries in the life of average New Yorkers. And you've been an extraordinary hero for us in the way that you've championed our cause, not only in the 5 boroughs, but in Albany as well. And the kinds of comments that you both made this morning, the kinds of commitments that you've demonstrated in the past, the position that Speaker Quinn has taken on libraries, the kinds of restorations that she's pushed for over the past years when she served as Speaker of the Council, all offer us some hope that the proposed reductions that we're commenting on this morning will not indeed come to pass, because the consequences of them will be excessively damaging to the health and welfare of New Yorkers and indeed of our city. I'm joined this morning by 3 members of the senior management group of the New York Public Library: Dave Offenson, our Chief Operating Officer; Ann Corriston, who is our Vice President for Library Services; and Sharon Watkins Hewitt, who is our Vice President for Finance. The proposed budget cut that the library faces for fiscal year 2011 is staggering. This is, believe it or not, the 17th year in which I've appeared before the Council Committee in order to comment on proposed budgets from the executive. I began doing this at a very prosperous time in New York. That is a very promising time, at least, because it was then that Mayor Dinkins and Speaker Vallone collaborated in a policy decision, crucially significant policy decision, to open all the libraries in all 5 boroughs 6 days a week, something that hadn't happened in decades and decades and decades. Just one historical footnote. It is important to remember that when Andrew Carnegie made a deal with the city to build public libraries, incorporated in that deal was a commitment on the part of the city to give the 3 library systems sufficient funds to have all the libraries open 6 days a week, 12 hours a day. That was the Carnegie Compact. So the restoration of 6 days of service, even if it wasn't 12 hours a day, was a monumentally important, terribly significant policy decision on the part of city government. And in the intervening years, there have been some ups and downs, but I have to say I've never faced a situation potentially as dire as the one that we face with the proposed reductions coming this year. These proposals come after 2 consecutive years of cuts to the New York Public Library's operating budgets from the city. In fiscal year 2009, we absorbed a 3% cut of $4.3 million. In fiscal 2010, during the adoption of the new budget, we endured a 4% cut, or $5.4 million. This means that prior to the proposed fiscal year 2011 cuts, the library had already been cut by close to $10 million, $2.7 million, or 7% of our operating support. And now the mayor's preliminary budget calls for cuts of $33 million to the New York Public Library, and that includes a mid-year cut in the present fiscal year of $5.9 million. If enacted, this budget will require drastic reductions in services to an already slimmed-down system within the New York Public Library at a time when libraries are serving more people in more diverse kinds of ways than we ever have before. In this testimony, I'd like to outline the devastating impact that a cut of this magnitude would have on the essential services that the New York Public Library provides to our city. Over the last year, millions of New Yorkers have used our programs, collections, and services, and they've done so in record numbers. These proposed reductions will force the New York Public Library to make substantial reductions to staff, hours, programs, and collections, limiting the accessibility of this critically important community resource. And I'll be giving you details in a few moments about just what those reductions would consist of. But first, let me give you a kind of overall context in which to contemplate those reductions. In this context will be what's happening at the library today. In an average week now, 350,000 people walk through the doors of the New York Public Library's 90 locations in the Bronx, Manhattan, and Staten Island. That is cumulatively 18 million physical visits to our library system a year. These patrons who come to us are of all ages, from all walks of life, toddlers to seniors, kindergarten to postgraduate students, employed and increasingly unemployed New Yorkers, those who are newly arrived in the city, as well as, of course, native New Yorkers. In the last year alone, there were 16 million physical visits to our branch libraries and 2.5 more visits to the 4 research libraries, as well as 29 million visits to the library's website. Last year, overall, in the 3 systems, there were 40 million visits to public libraries in New York City. That's more than all the culturals and all the sports teams combined by at least 1.5 million. So no one should ever labor under the illusion that libraries aren't highly relevant to New Yorkers or that libraries are not an essential public service in New York City, like police, fire protection, and education. In our system, 21 million items were circulated and even more were consulted within libraries among our collections of over 50 million books and other materials, which make us one of the 5 leading libraries of the world in terms of scale and size of collections. In the Bronx, libraries such as the Melrose, Marshall, Westchester Square, Tremont, and City Island branches have experienced over 20% gains in circulation. Similar numbers are occurring in other locations throughout our entire library system. Our Science, Industry, and Business Library here in Manhattan is the locus of our large and very, very advanced Job Information Center. And that library has seen a 61% jump in circulation, and it's also experienced a 23% jump in overall attendance. 25,000 New Yorkers have attended job-related classes at our library. These classes remain vital to New Yorkers who are out of work, who are looking to change careers, start a new business, or retrain through educational programs in order to find a position in this challenging economy. Every single one of our libraries has a specialist trained in job search to help patrons who are looking for new jobs. More than 41,000 classes and programs were offered system-wide. Attendance at programs for children and teens exceeded 550,000. Hundreds of New Yorkers each month receive assistance from our staff with retirement planning, tax preparation, voter registration, or how to start a business. Thousands of books from our collections were brought to nursing homes, senior citizen centers, and prisons. And almost 25% of New York Public Library's patrons stated unequivocally that no alternatives at all exist for the library services that they use. In addition to last year's budget cut, the library was asked to absorb, as I mentioned earlier, close to a $6 million cut in the present fiscal year. That's the mid-year cut. What happened as a result of that? Lots of not-so-great things. This required us to reduce services at 2/3 of the libraries across Bronx, Manhattan, and Staten Island. It left the library with little choice but to reduce service to an average of 45 hours a week for our neighborhood sites, down from an average of 51 hours. It resulted in Sunday service closure at 5 of our 9 sites, leaving only 1 circulating library open on Sundays in each borough. The FY11 preliminary budget calls for reductions of an additional $33 million to the New York Public Library system. A reduction of this size, if approved, would necessitate the elimination of 650 full-time positions, 600 of which would be unionized employees. Public service hours would be decimated, brought down to an average of 28 hours per week, from 3 to 4 days per week. That's what our libraries would be open instead of 6 days. Down from our current 6 days of service. The impact of a cut of this magnitude would be tremendous. Here are some facts and figures. 5 million fewer items would be circulated, 1.7 million, close to 2 million fewer items circulated to teens and to children, 6 million fewer visits would be made to libraries, 1 million fewer, we calculate, by young children and by teenagers, 400,000 fewer visits to library programs by young people overall, 1.5 million fewer computer sessions, and severely reduced access to libraries to senior citizens who often use the library in the morning when they're quietest. Many of these morning hours would have to be cut. We would lose 1.2 million visits and 1 million fewer materials circulated in our lower Manhattan libraries. Now, I'm going to talk very briefly about the 3 boroughs that we serve and what would take place as a negative consequence in each borough. So within Manhattan, Lower Manhattan, 1.2 million fewer visits and 1 million fewer materials. Now, what's important to keep in mind is that Lower Manhattan consists of a population where 72% of the families earn as a family income less than $50,000 a year, and 45% of the residents of Lower Manhattan do not have a high school diploma or a GED. These are families that simply cannot afford to buy a book, that have no computer access at home, and that without a public library, they would be completely shut out from those kinds of resources. A similar and even more dire situation exists in the Bronx, in Central Bronx. In the Central Bronx, we anticipate 800,000 fewer visits to our libraries there and close to 500,000 fewer materials circulated. The Central Bronx is a part of New York where 82% of the families earn less than $50,000 a year, and where 50% of the residents don't have a high school diploma or its equivalent, and where only 33% of the residents are native speakers of English. On Staten Island, we anticipate, again, more than 500,000 fewer visits, 500,000 fewer items circulated, 1,200 fewer programs, and over 30,000 fewer visits by school-age children's library programs in the branches that we have on Staten Island. To conclude, I think we all realize how libraries are so terribly significant to the economically disadvantaged, how they provide inspiration to the new immigrant in our town, and how they have always been, and we hope always will be, a safe and nurturing space for those in need. But more importantly, libraries, our libraries in our 3 systems, provide answers to those in search of knowledge and discovery, which is an incredibly important service. Libraries now are more significant in the lives of New Yorkers than they have been, I think, in at least half a century. Just look at the 18 million times people walked through the New York Public Library's doors last year, or the over 29 million visits to the library's website. While the impact of the recession continues to take its toll across our city, the important thing to remember is that people are coming to libraries in ever-increasing numbers, in part because of the recession. Millions of New Yorkers continue to use our rich collections, our interesting programming, our computer training and literacy classes, our ESOL programs, homework help, job search, small business resources. These are just the services that we think we need to help put people back to work and help the city climb out of this recession. In past years, Speaker Quinn and the City Council have championed funding of our city's libraries, recognizing how essential the services are that libraries provide to New Yorkers. We are truly, truly grateful for this support, and we want to be clearly on record in expressing our gratitude to all of you. The fiscal 11 proposed budget of $33 million would really cripple the library's ability to deliver the kinds of service at the level that we want to for the people of this city who are demanding those services in record numbers. This would essentially wipe out, I think, some decades of progress made by our library system, and we again seek your support in helping to assure that libraries keep the doors open so that all New Yorkers may continue to access the invaluable and needed resources that we represent to them and their children. Thank you very much for the opportunity to testify before you, and I look forward to answering your questions.